Welcome back. We have our current events panel featuring Mike Patton and Michelle Simard. Okay, we're going to pivot away from, I guess, pay raises and whatnot from our federal politicians and go to a new tool that might be employed to help regulate us, the lowly citizens of Canada. And we're going to talk about the online harms bill known as C-63. Michelle, why don't you start us off on this for those who are not as familiar with this bill? What is going on here?
So it's dubbed the online harms bill because it's a bill to regulate social media in various forms of expression, mainly in particular hate speech, and it qualifies it, and it's asking social media companies to regulate it. And I would argue that it's gone a little too far because when on the face of it, it looks beautiful. It's like, oh, here it is to protect children. And we need to protect our children. But the problem with that I see is just like it's not properly written and it's actually infringing on a lot of people's freedom of expression. And I think that it should fail. I think it should fail. It's not well written and it needs to be amended in some form.
Well, there seems to be quite the outcry, Mike, from many Canadians, those experts and those who feel maybe that they would be censored as a result of this. What specifically are the concerns with this legislation, this bill?
Well, there's a couple of main concerns. One of the biggest concerns is it makes it against regulations to say something that is false. But who decides what is true and what is false? The other thing is it's not just hate speech, which is really sometimes difficult to define, but deeply offensive speech. So if I say something that offends you, that's against the rules and you can make a complaint. And the experts are really having a lot of problems with this because we've seen lots of examples and mostly through COVID where people argued what you're saying is false and it turned out not to be false because even true and false, it turns out, are sometimes in the eye of the beholder. Secondly, you know, it's hard. As a libertarian and somebody who believes in freedom of speech, I believe that sometimes you have the right to be offended, that I should be able to say things that you find offensive, and you should be able to argue back. The fact that you can find something offensive and then shut me down is a tool that is increasingly used when you don't agree with what I'm trying to say and you're just trying to shut me up.
And not just shut you down, meaning you can't say that anymore, but brand you, I guess, a hate speech monger, and then potentially jail you and fine you. I mean, there are
That's
serious
right. Right.
consequences,
If
Mike.
if if I disagree with a person who comes from a minority background, I can just disagree with them. It doesn't necessarily mean I hate their minority status. And that's the trick that is often used, where you disagree with somebody who has some sort of minority status, and they say, you just hate me because I am of the minority.
And Michelle, Mike brought up an excellent point. This always usually whittles down to who's the arbiter? Who's the arbiter of what is harmful, what is offensive, what is hate speech? I mean, I guess one could argue there's a whole spectrum. I mean, you could be sitting here or here and anywhere in between. And for what's offensive to one could be
It will be the
acceptable to the other.
courts. It will be the courts. Like when I went to law school, the major cases that I studied were Keistra and Zundel, both about the Holocaust and Jewish people and so forth. And at the end of the day, they were found to have hate speech. And Zundel was subsequently deported back to Germany and had to put time in prison. But so it's usually the courts that define it. And the problem here is that it's a slippery slope. The definition. What's more scary is that if they believe that somebody intends to put hate speech, well, they can get a peace bond, and that person may not be able to say anything, and they haven't even done anything yet. Which then goes to George Orwell's 1984 book, where it's like, the thought police. You're about to say something, but you can't even say it yet. But people believe you're going to say it, so we're going to stop you from saying it, and that becomes scary. And I don't think that's a threshold that we really need to pass right now. I don't think we're there yet. And freedom of speech is paramount. However, yes, causing harm and proving it. So I think the courts are going to have to define it better, or if they're going to do legislation like this, they need to define it better.
Yeah, I mean, I think many of us are concerned about thought police. So in anticipation of you being offensive, we're going to fine and or arrest you, or
Yes.
it's quite absurd. Um, we'll have to keep our eye on this. Obviously, this is proposed; it hasn't passed yet, and we'll have to see because there's a lot of opposition to this bill. We're going to pick up some more topics when we return after this break.